You're standing in line at a coffee shop, third from the register, running your order in your head like it's a line reading. The espresso machine hisses somewhere behind the counter. Your card fumbles at the reader. It beeps red. Behind you, someone glances up from their laptop for exactly half a second, then looks back down. That's it. That's the whole interaction. No words exchanged, no expression held long enough to even qualify as a reaction. You will think about that half-second for the rest of the day. You'll replay it in the car, embellish it a little in the shower, hand it a weight it never earned. This is about why a stranger's glance, one they've already forgotten, can sit in your chest for hours, replaying at red lights and right before you fall asleep. And the answer isn't really about strangers at all. It's about a piece of wiring so old it doesn't know the difference between a judgmental coworker and a predator in the grass. Start with what psychologists call the spotlight effect. In the late 1990s, Cornell researcher Thomas Gilovich ran an experiment where he had college students wear an embarrassing T-shirt, a large image of singer Barry Manilow, into a room full of strangers. Then guess how many people had noticed and remembered it. The students estimated around 50%. The actual number who remembered was closer to 25%. People consistently overestimate how much others notice them by roughly double. You are the main character of your own life, running your own internal camera at all times, and everyone else is the main character of theirs, which means you are, at most, a background extra in the movie playing behind their eyes. Nobody else is watching the dailies of your life the way you are. But here's where it gets interesting. Even when people do notice something, they forget it fast, and they judge it far less harshly than you'd expect. That's not just a hunch, and it's measurable. And it's been measured more than once, in more than one lab, by more than one team trying to figure out why this feeling is so stubborn. Psychologist Roy Baumeister spent decades studying why negative experiences stick harder than positive ones, publishing a landmark 2001 paper literally titled, "Bad is Stronger Than Good." His research, drawing on hundreds of studies across relationships, memory, and emotion, found that people recall criticism with more detail, more emotional charge, and for longer than they recall praise, sometimes by a factor of 3 to 5 times. A single sharp comment can outweigh a dozen compliments in terms of how much psychological real estate it occupies, how long it lingers, how easily it resurfaces uninvited. So when you scan a memory for evidence that a stranger judged you, your brain is rigged to find it, magnify it, and file it under important, even if the actual event was a half-second glance at a coffee cart that meant nothing at all to the person doing the glancing. But here's where it gets interesting. That imbalance didn't appear by accident, and it isn't random bad luck in how your brain happens to be built. It's a leftover survival setting, installed long before coffee shops or credit cards existed, back when the cost of being misjudged wasn't embarrassment, it was exile. In the early 2000s, UCLA neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger ran fMRI scans on people playing a simple digital ball-tossing game called Cyberball, where participants were gradually excluded by other virtual players for no stated reason. The brain scans showed something strange. Social exclusion activated the anterior cingulate cortex, the same region that lights up during physical pain, the same region that fires when you stub your toe or touch something hot. Being left out doesn't just feel bad in some vague, metaphorical way. To your brain, it registers as an actual injury, chemically and neurologically overlapping with a physical one in ways researchers are still mapping out. Purdue psychologist Kipling Williams has argued that ostracism was, for most of human history, a functional death sentence. A person cast out of the group lost access to food, protection, shared warmth, and mates. There was no surviving alone on the savannah, no backup plan, no going it alone until things blew over. The fear you feel from a stranger's glance is a fossil of a much older, much higher stakes fear, the fear of being cast out of the only group that could keep you alive. But here's where it gets interesting. That system was built for a world of maybe 150 people, the rough limit, According to anthropologist Robin Dunbar's well-known research on human social group sizes, of how many relationships a human brain can meaningfully track at once, you now live in a world where strangers number in the billions, and somehow the wiring never got the memo. It still treats every unfamiliar face as a potential vote on whether you get to stay in the tribe, even when that face belongs to someone you will never see again. But here's where it gets interesting. It isn't just that you overestimate how much strangers judge you. You also underestimate how much they end up liking you once an interaction actually happens. Cornell psychologist Erica Boothby, working with Gilovich and others, ran a series of studies in the late 2010s on what they named the liking gap, the consistent difference between how a conversation partner rates the interaction and how they predict the other person rated it. Across dozens of paired conversations between strangers, participants reliably guessed their partner liked them less than their partner actually reported. The gap held up across contexts: dorm roommates meeting for the first time, co-workers in a training session, strangers paired for a 5-minute chat in a lab. People walked away from conversations that objectively went fine, convinced they'd underperformed. That half-second glance in the coffee line isn't an isolated glitch. It's part of a much broader habit of assuming the worst read on how you're coming across. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, roughly 12% of U.S. adults will experience social anxiety disorder at some point in their lives. Not shyness, but a diagnosable pattern where the fear of judgment interferes with work, relationships, and daily functioning severely enough to be clinically significant. 12% is not a fringe number. That's something close to 1 in 8 people you pass on the street, quietly running the same anxious math you are, privately convinced they're the only one doing it. The fear of judgment isn't a personal flaw. It's closer to a default setting with a wide range of intensity dials, and most people have it turned up higher than they let on. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part that should actually change how you feel about that coffee shop moment. Gilovich ran a follow-up line of research on what he called the illusion of transparency, our tendency to believe our internal states, especially our anxiety, are far more visible on our faces than they actually are. In one version of the study, people were asked to lie convincingly about the taste of a drink they secretly hated, then guess how many observers could tell they were lying. They wildly overestimated it, again by roughly double. The nervous flutter you feel when you fumble your card isn't broadcasting outward the way it feels like it is from the inside. It's almost entirely internal weather, invisible to everyone standing near you. Here's the wrinkle, though, and it's not a comfortable one. Social media didn't just add more strangers to judge you. It broke the ancient logic of the whole system from the inside out. For most of human history, the group was a few dozen familiar faces who saw you repeatedly, forgave you, and updated their opinion of you slowly, over years, based on a pattern rather than a single captured moment. Now, a stranger's judgment can arrive as a screenshot, permanent, searchable, stripped of context, and multiplied by an audience your ancestors never had to account for. The fear response evolved to manage a village. It's now running defense for the entire internet, an audience with no edges and no memory limit. That mismatch isn't a personal weakness. It's an unsolved design problem, and honestly, nobody fully knows yet how the human nervous system is supposed to adapt to an audience of strangers that never actually ends. Maybe it doesn't adapt cleanly. Maybe some of that low, constant hum of self-consciousness so many people carry now is simply the cost of the environment we've built for ourselves, a tax nobody remembers agreeing to pay. Still, for all that, most of your actual, real-life strangers are not the internet. They are the person behind you in line who has their own coffee order rehearsed in their head, their own version of a red beeping card waiting somewhere in their week. You're back in that coffee shop. Your card finally goes through. The stranger with the laptop hasn't thought about you again. Not out of coldness, just out of the ordinary forgettable math of being a person with their own spotlight to worry about. Somewhere between the register and the door, the fear you carried in for that half-second interaction has already outlived its own evidence. You were never really afraid of a stranger's glance. You were afraid of being left outside the fire, back when that meant something different than it does now. And the fire, it turns out, was never actually going out. It was only ever you, standing a little too close to the flame, mistaking its ordinary flicker for a verdict.